I'm now at the Huajang Grand Canyon Bridge, the tallest bridge in the world. On Sunday, the bridge has opened to traffic since its construction began in 2022. Upon its completion, travel across the canyon, which once took 2 hours, shrinks to just 2 minutes. The bridge is also expected to greatly enhance regional transportation and boost economic development by improving connectivity in this mountainous region.
American scientists watched the footage and refused to believe it was real. A bridge so impossibly high that clouds float underneath it. A structure 3 times heavier than the Eiffel Tower. Built in 3.5 years. Through a mountain, they literally split in half.
According to Mr. Liu, just after its completion, the main span of the Huajang Grand Canyon Bridge ranks the first in the world. The height also ranks the first in the world, a height that reaches 625 meters. And also it both ranks the first in width and height.
The government called it infrastructure. Scientists called it something else entirely. Because what China quietly built in a remote canyon has left engineers across the world scrambling for answers. Nobody saw this coming. Nobody thought it was even possible. And now that it exists, nothing in modern construction will ever be the same again. There is a bridge in southern China that sits so high above the ground that clouds pass underneath it. Not occasionally, not as a rare weather event, but regularly enough that engineers had to account for it during the design process. Drivers crossing it on a clear morning can look out of their windows and see nothing but open sky below them. No canyon walls, no river, no ground. Just sky. And if you were to stand at the bottom of that canyon and look straight up, the bridge above you would appear almost impossibly small, like something you might see in an architectural drawing, rather than a structure carrying real vehicles and real people. That bridge is called Huajang Bridge, and it currently holds the record for the highest bridge on the planet. It rises 625 meters above the floor of Huajang Canyon in Guizhou Province in the southwest of China. To give that number some context, the top of the Shard in London sits at around 310 meters. The Empire State Building, including its antenna, reaches just over 440 meters. Huajang Bridge clears both of them. It is by any measure an extraordinary piece of infrastructure. But what makes it genuinely interesting is not just the height, or the engineering, or even the scale of the construction effort. What makes it interesting is the reason it was built in the first place. To understand that, you need to understand where it is. Guizhou Province sits in the southwestern interior of China, and it is not an easy place to live. The terrain there is almost entirely mountainous. According to data from Chinese geographical surveys, more than 90% of the province is covered by hills and mountains, leaving very little flat land for farming, building, or travel. The landscape is dramatic and, by most accounts, genuinely beautiful. Steep karst formations rise out of forested valleys. Rivers cut deep gorges through the rock. The views from elevated ground are the kind that appear on travel websites and in geography documentaries. Some visitors have compared the scenery to parts of Switzerland, and the comparison is not entirely unreasonable. But beauty and livability are not the same thing. For the people who have lived in Guizhou for generations, the mountains have been far more of an obstacle than an attraction. There is a saying that has been passed down in the province for a long time, and it translates roughly as no 3 feet of level ground. It is not a poetic exaggeration. It is a fairly accurate description of the physical reality that people there have had to deal with on a daily basis for hundreds of years. Consider what it actually means to live in a place like that. If you're a farmer trying to get crops to a market, you cannot simply load a vehicle and drive in a straight line. The roads wind around mountains, drop into valleys, climb back up the other side, and repeat that pattern for hours. A town that you can see clearly from where you are standing might take 2 hours to reach by road. Not because the road is in bad condition, but because the road has to go around a mountain that is sitting directly between you and where you want to go. That kind of geography does not just make travel inconvenient, it has real economic consequences. Crops spoil before they reach buyers. Businesses cannot easily import the materials they need. Workers cannot access job opportunities in neighboring areas. Children in rural parts of the province have historically had limited access to schools in larger towns, simply because getting there and back was not practically manageable on a daily basis. These are not hypothetical problems. According to reporting from Chinese state media and independent assessments by organizations tracking regional development in China, Guizhou was for a long time one of the poorest provinces in the country. The combination of difficult terrain and geographic isolation created a situation where economic development that was happening elsewhere in China was simply not reaching large parts of Guizhou. The mountains were not just a landscape feature, they were, in a very real and measurable sense, a barrier. The Chinese government identified this problem and, at some point in the early 2000s, began to act on it at a scale that is difficult to fully comprehend. The approach was straightforward in concept, if not in execution. If geography is the problem, then you change the geography. You do not wait for circumstances to improve, you build your way through the obstacles. The result of that decision, played out over roughly 2 decades, is a number that takes a moment to process properly. As of recent counts, Guizhou Province contains approximately 32,000 bridges. That figure refers to Guizhou alone, not to China as a whole. This single province, which is not the largest in the country, has more bridges than most nations have in their entire territory. Many of these are substantial structures, spanning deep valleys and wide gorges, carrying highways and rail lines across terrain that would otherwise be almost completely impassable at any reasonable speed. The scale of this construction effort represents one of the largest regional infrastructure programs in modern history. Engineers, planners, and construction crews have spent years working in difficult mountain conditions to build a network that has, according to official statistics and independent economic analyses, significantly reduced travel times across the province. Routes that once required hours of slow mountain driving can now be covered in a fraction of the time. The connection between communities that were once effectively cut off from each other has, in practical terms, transformed what daily life looks like for millions of people. Among all of those 32,000 structures, one stands apart, not just because of its record-breaking height, but because of what it represents and how it was built. Huajang Bridge is the most visible and the most dramatic result of a decision to stop letting geography dictate what is and is not possible. It crosses a canyon that is, without the bridge, a serious natural obstacle. With it, the crossing takes approximately 2 minutes. Before it existed, the same journey took around 2 hours by road. That shift from 2 hours to 2 minutes is the clearest possible illustration of what this entire project was designed to achieve. It is a number worth sitting with because it captures something that raw statistics about investment figures and construction timelines do not quite manage to convey. The bridge did not just improve the commute, it changed the relationship between a community and its surrounding landscape in a way that will affect how people there live and work for generations to come. And yet, as significant as the bridge itself is, it is only one part of a much larger story. Because to build it, and to build the highway it sits on, China did not just construct across the landscape. In at least one very literal case, it went straight through it. Before a single cable was stretched across Huajang Canyon, before the first tower foundation was poured, there was a mountain standing in the way. Not metaphorically, literally. A solid mass of rock sitting directly in the path of the planned route for the Guizhou S57 expressway, the highway that Huajang Bridge would eventually become part of. The engineers working on the project had a choice. They could redesign the route to go around the mountain, which would have added significant distance and defeated much of the purpose of building a direct connection through the province in the first place. Or they could remove the obstacle. They chose to remove it. Using explosives and large-scale drilling equipment, construction teams carved a V-shaped gap directly through the mountain. Not a tunnel, which would have gone under it, but an open cut straight through the rock face, splitting the mountain into 2 separate walls with the highway running between them. The scale of that operation is hard to visualize without standing there. The amount of rock that had to be extracted, broken apart, and cleared away was enormous. The blasts from the explosives were powerful enough that nearby villages could feel them. The work had to be carried out with careful engineering oversight to ensure that the remaining rock walls on either side of the cut were structurally stable and would not pose a risk to the road below or the workers carrying out the excavation. A mountain that had stood in that form for millions of years was reshaped in a matter of months. That cut through the mountain is now part of the S57 expressway, a highway that stretches approximately 150 kilometers through some of the most challenging terrain in the province, connecting 14 different districts that were previously difficult to reach from one another. The expressway is itself a significant engineering achievement, but it is the bridge at the end of it that has drawn the most attention from engineers, tourists, and infrastructure experts around the world. Finding the right location for Huajang Bridge was not a simple task. Engineers spent considerable time studying the canyon, examining sites several kilometers upstream and downstream from the eventual location. What they were looking for was rock. Specifically, rock that was strong enough and stable enough to anchor the foundations of towers that would each weigh thousands of tons and carry the load of one of the longest and heaviest suspension bridges ever constructed. The canyon walls had to be able to take that kind of force without shifting or cracking over time. Getting that assessment wrong would have had consequences that no amount of engineering ingenuity could later correct. The final design settled on a structure measuring 2,890 meters in total length, with a main span of 1,420 meters. That main span is the section of the bridge that hangs freely across the open canyon, supported only by the cables running from the tops of the two main towers down to anchor points on either side. It is an enormous distance to bridge without intermediate support, and the engineering required to make it work reliably under real-world conditions is correspondingly complex. The bridge uses a steel truss suspension design. The deck of the bridge, the part that vehicles actually drive on, is supported by a framework of steel trusses rather than a solid flat surface. This approach is common in long-span bridge construction because it reduces the overall weight of the structure while maintaining the necessary strength and rigidity. The steel framework that makes up Huajang Bridge consists of 93 individual truss sections, and the combined weight of all that steel comes to approximately 22,000 tons. For comparison, the Eiffel Tower in Paris weighs around 7,300 tons. Huajang Bridge contains roughly 3 times as much steel as one of the most recognizable structures on Earth. The challenge that follows from that number is obvious. All of that steel had to be assembled at a height of 625 meters above a rocky canyon floor. Standard construction cranes were not a realistic option. The tallest crane currently operating in the world stands around 250 meters high. Even if you could somehow position one at the bottom of the canyon, it would not come close to reaching the working height required. The canyon walls slope at angles that make it impractical to simply park heavy equipment at the rim and lower materials down. The solution was a cable crane system. A thick steel cable was anchored on one side of the canyon and stretched across to the other, running high above the canyon floor and above the eventual position of the bridge deck. This cable functioned as an aerial runway. Individual truss sections, each weighing multiple tons, were attached to a trolley that ran along the cable. The trolley could carry each section out across the canyon and position it precisely where it needed to go. Workers on both sides and on platforms suspended in the canyon guided the sections into place and secured them. The assembly sequence was carefully managed to keep the structure balanced throughout the build. Rather than starting at one end and working across to the other, which would have created an uneven load on the anchor points and towers, engineers built outward from a central point in both directions simultaneously. Each section added to one side was matched by a corresponding section added on the other, maintaining equilibrium throughout the process. The positioning of each piece was tracked using China's Beidou satellite navigation system, which allowed workers to place sections with a level of accuracy that would not have been achievable through manual measurement alone at those heights and in those conditions. Before any of this physical work began, the entire construction sequence was modeled digitally. Engineers built a detailed virtual version of the bridge and ran through the assembly process in simulation, testing how each stage of construction would behave under its own weight and under the stresses created by the addition of subsequent sections. This kind of virtual pre-assembly process allows teams to identify potential problems and conflicts before they encounter them in reality, when fixing them would be far more costly and time-consuming. Every connection point, every bolt placement, and every welding requirement was mapped out in the computer model before workers encountered it on site. The canyon itself created specific engineering problems that went beyond the challenge of working at height. The walls on the two sides of the canyon are not symmetrical. They slope at different angles and have different profiles, which meant that the two main support towers could not simply be identical copies of each other. The North Tower was built to a height of 262 meters. The South Tower stands at 205 meters. The anchor points where the main cables are secured into the canyon walls are also positioned at different depths and locations on each side because the geometry of the terrain required it. Designing a bridge to function correctly when the two sides it is anchored to are not mirror images of each other adds a significant layer of complexity to an already demanding engineering problem. Guizhou Province is also an area with seismic activity. Earthquakes occur there, and a structure of this size and weight, hanging from cables across an open canyon, responds to ground movement in ways that have to be carefully managed. The bridge deck, suspended as it is, behaves somewhat like a pendulum. When the ground shakes, the deck wants to swing. Left uncontrolled, that movement could cause serious damage over time. Engineers addressed this by installing shock absorbers at both ends of the bridge, designed to absorb the energy of seismic movement and limit how much the structure shifts in response. Wind presented a separate but equally serious problem. Canyon environments do not behave like open terrain when it comes to airflow. When wind is funneled through a narrow gap in the landscape, it accelerates, a process explained by what is known as the Venturi effect. In Huajang Canyon, wind speeds have been recorded at levels comparable to fast-moving train traffic. A bridge deck of this length and weight hanging in open air is highly sensitive to wind forces. If the aerodynamic behavior of the structure is not properly understood and designed for, wind can cause oscillations that build on each other over time, with potentially catastrophic results. To get a proper understanding of how the bridge would behave in wind, engineers built physical scale models and tested them in wind tunnels. They also used Doppler LiDAR technology during the planning phase. This system works by sending laser beams into the atmosphere and measuring how they reflect off moisture particles carried by the wind. By analyzing those reflections, the system can build a three-dimensional map of wind behavior in real time, showing not just wind speed but direction, turbulence, and variation at different heights. This gave engineers an accurate picture of actual conditions inside the canyon rather than relying purely on general weather data or theoretical models. The monitoring did not stop when the bridge opened to traffic. Fiber optic strands were embedded directly inside the bridge cables during construction. As the cables stretch under load, those strands stretch with them. By sending light through the fiber optic system and measuring how it reflects back, engineers can monitor the precise level of strain on every cable continuously. This data is collected around the clock, giving a real-time picture of how the structure is performing and allowing any unexpected changes to be identified quickly. The bridge is, in that sense, constantly reporting on its own condition to the teams responsible for maintaining it. The engineering story of Huajang Bridge is remarkable enough on its own terms. The height, the construction method, the solutions developed to deal with wind and earthquakes and asymmetrical canyon walls, any one of those elements would be worth examining in detail. Taken together, they represent a genuinely impressive body of technical work carried out under difficult conditions in a short period of time. The bridge was completed in approximately 3.5 years at a reported cost of around $300 million. For a structure of this complexity and scale, that timeline is fast by any international standard. But if you step back from the engineering details and ask a more basic question, why was this bridge built, and why here, and why now, the answer turns out to be more layered than the straightforward infrastructure explanation suggests. Because Huajang Bridge was not built purely to solve a transport problem, even though it does solve one. It was built as part of something much larger, and understanding what that is changes how you look at the structure itself. Since 2012, the Chinese government has been running what it refers to internally as a war on poverty. This is not a casual phrase. It describes a coordinated, centrally directed effort to raise living standards in the parts of China that were left behind during the rapid economic growth of the 1990s and 2000s. Many of those areas are in the interior and southwest of the country, in provinces where the terrain made conventional economic development difficult. Guizhou was one of the primary targets of this effort. It was consistently ranked among the poorest provinces in China by income and development measures, and the geographic isolation created by its mountainous landscape was a significant reason for that. The infrastructure investment that followed was enormous. Highways, high-speed rail lines, tunnels, and bridges were built across the province at a pace and scale that had no real precedent in the region's history. The 32,000 bridges in Guizhou are part of that broader push, and so is the S57 expressway and the bridge that sits at its most dramatic point. According to official Chinese government reporting and assessments by international development researchers, the results of this investment have been significant. Travel times across the province have dropped sharply. Access to markets, schools, hospitals, and employment has improved for communities that previously had very limited connections to the wider economy. Guizhou now has high-speed rail links and an international airport, both of which would have seemed unlikely a generation ago given where the province was starting from. This is one part of the answer to why the bridge was built. It was an instrument of regional development policy, part of a calculated effort to use infrastructure as a tool for economic change. That explanation is consistent with what the evidence shows about outcomes in the province, and it is the explanation that Chinese government sources emphasize when discussing projects like this one. But there is a second dimension to this story, and it operates at a different scale entirely. Guizhou is also part of China's Belt and Road Initiative, a global infrastructure and investment strategy that the Chinese government has been developing since around 2013. The Belt and Road Initiative involves Chinese investment in infrastructure projects across dozens of countries, with the stated aim of creating economic connections between China and regions across Asia, Africa, Europe, and beyond. The strategic logic behind it is that physical connectivity, roads, ports, rail links, bridges, creates economic relationships, and economic relationships create influence. Within that context, projects like Huajang Bridge serve a purpose that goes beyond their immediate practical function. They are demonstrations. China is showing to its own population and to the rest of the world what its development model is capable of producing. A bridge that is the highest on Earth, built in 3.5 years through some of the most difficult terrain on the planet, sends a message that is not primarily about crossing a canyon. It's about capability, about ambition, and about a willingness to do things that other countries would either not attempt or not be able to execute. That message is calculated, and the calculation extends to how the bridge was designed to be used after it opened. Huajang Bridge is not simply a road crossing. It was built from the outset with tourism as a central part of its purpose. One of the main support towers contains an elevator. It is not a service elevator for maintenance workers. It is a public elevator, 800 meters tall according to reports, that carries tourists up through the interior of the tower to an observation level near the top. At that level, there is a 2-story facility that includes a coffee shop with views across the canyon. The experience of riding up through a bridge tower and having a coffee while looking out over a 625-meter drop into a forested gorge is, by any reasonable assessment, an unusual one. Below the road deck, a glass-floored walkway has been installed on the underside of the bridge. Visitors can walk out onto this structure and look straight down through the glass to the verdant canyon floor hundreds of meters below. Glass-floored walkways and observation platforms have become a recognizable feature of Chinese tourism infrastructure over the past decade, and Huajang fits into that pattern. They are designed to create a specific kind of experience, one that is visually dramatic, physically striking, and highly shareable on social media. There is also an artificial waterfall incorporated into the structure, spanning a significant width of the bridge and creating a visual feature that is visible from a distance, and particularly striking when photographed from below or from the air. Whether you find this addition to a piece of transport infrastructure strange or inspired probably depends on how you think about the relationship between engineering and spectacle, but it is consistent with the overall approach. The tourism ambitions go further than observation decks and coffee shops. Huajang Bridge already has a bungee jumping platform. Plans have been announced for professional base jumping competitions to be hosted at the site, taking advantage of the extraordinary height and the clear open space of the canyon. There is also reported discussion of developing an extreme sports complex in the canyon below the bridge, which would make the entire area a destination for adventure tourism rather than simply a point along a highway. The bridge in this vision is not just something you drive across, it is somewhere you go. This combination of record-breaking infrastructure and purpose-built tourism experience reflects a broader pattern that has become increasingly visible in China's approach to large construction projects. Bridges, dams, and other major structures are being designed not just to function as infrastructure, but to attract visitors, generate economic activity in the surrounding area, and project an image of the country as a place capable of producing things that exist nowhere else in the world. The two goals reinforce each other. The sucert. Infrastructure investment creates the physical asset. Tourism development generates returns from that asset beyond its basic utility. And the international attention that comes from holding a record or featuring in news coverage and travel content around the world serves the broader strategic purpose of demonstrating what China can do. For Guizhou specifically, this matters because tourism has become one of the significant drivers of the provincial economy as infrastructure improvements have made it more accessible. A province that was once difficult to reach and largely unknown outside of China is now receiving millions of domestic tourists annually and growing numbers of international visitors. The natural scenery that made life difficult for generations of residents turns out, when you can actually get to it, to be a considerable economic asset. The same mountains that trapped communities in poverty for centuries are now, with adequate roads and bridges, part of what is drawing people and money into the region. What Huajang Bridge represents when you pull together all of these threads is a fairly clear example of infrastructure being used simultaneously to address a domestic social problem, to advance a geopolitical strategy, and to create a commercial asset. None of these purposes are hidden exactly. They are each part of how Chinese officials and state media have described the project at various points. But they sit together in a way that is worth paying attention to, because it reflects a particular approach to large-scale public investment that is different from how similar projects tend to be conceived and justified in other parts of the world. Whether that approach produces better or worse outcomes than alternatives is a question that economists and policy researchers continue to debate. What is harder to argue with is the physical result. The bridge exists. The crossing time dropped from 2 hours to 2 minutes. The province is more connected than it has ever been. People who previously had limited access to the wider Chinese economy now have much better access to it. And visitors from around the world are booking flights to come and stand on a glass walkway and look straight down 625 meters to a canyon floor at a bridge that was built in a place that most of them had never heard of a decade ago. China did not just solve an engineering problem in a remote mountain province. It built something that the world now knows about, wants to see, and travels to visit. That outcome was part of the plan from the beginning, and by any measure, it is working.